Hello, and welcome to the Knox County Public Library's Tutor Team. My name is Mr. Frederick, and today I will be tutoring grades 4 and 5 in English Language Arts. Our topic and standard today are going to be covering theme and being able to summarize what that theme is. So, without further ado, we're going to get started with our PowerPoint. So let's have some theme-filled cupcakes today. What is a theme? A theme is a central idea or message of a story. A theme is often somewhat hidden, which means that you're not going to find it directly in the story, that you're going to have to go in there and really dig deep sometimes to figure out what that theme or that message of the story is. Usually the reader needs to infer the theme, and if you remember what we talked about with inferences, that means you're going to take what you've read, you're going to take what you've known, or from like TV or other sources, and you're going to come up with a good guess. After reading an entire story or a book, the reader should consider the overall message that the author was trying to convey through the book. So an analogy, have you ever had a cream-filled cupcake? What happens when you start eating the cupcake? You eventually bite into the yummy filling. You can't see it on the outside, but it was there on the inside the whole time. Theme is like the cream filling of a cupcake. You can't see it from the outside of a book, but after you read it and you get into the story, you will find it. It's the hidden message inside the book. You can determine the theme once you've started reading the book. Do you remember the tale of the Little Red Riding Hood? If you do, if you don't, the story was about a little girl who was going to bring food to her sick grandmother, and her mother told her not to talk to strangers along the way. And as she was going, she ran into a wolf who seemed very nice and was talking to her, and he kind of tricked her into getting her where she was going and what she was doing. So he went ahead and ran ahead of her and ran to Grandma's house, disguised himself, and then whenever she came, he gobbled her all up. So what do you think the theme of that story is? Well, that appearances can sometimes be deceiving. When you think about the story, the wolf seemed kind. So Little Red Riding Hood trusted him. She told the wolf where her grandmother lived, and then the devious wolf basically tricked Little Red Riding Hood by sneaking into grandmother's house and disguising himself as the grandmother. We're going to read this short story. Dan, why don't you get started on that science project tonight? Mom said. Mom, it's not even due for 2 more weeks. I have plenty of time to finish it, Dan replied as he sat on the couch watching TV. But if you get it done now, you won't have to worry about it, Mom reminded him. Don't worry, Mom, I'll get it done, Dan answered. 1 week later, the project was still unfinished. When Dan's mom reminded him to get started on the project, he promised to start on it the next day. The next day, however, Dan became sick with a severe case of the flu. He spent the next 3 days in bed. He finally, on the day before the science project was due, felt better, and at 9:30 p.m., Dan put the finishing touches on his project. However, he still had to write a report. Ugh, he groaned. I have learned my lesson, Mom. I will never do this again. So thinking about that, what do you think the theme is? Remember, a theme cannot use names. It has to be universal, which means it can be applied to more than one story. Think about what the character did. Think about and ask yourself, what did the character learn in the story? In this case, he learned, don't wait until the last minute to tackle something that could be time-consuming like that project. When given a task, you need to finish it as soon as possible. Now, it can be worded in a different way if you said something different. That's okay. The evidence in our story was that he had a lot of opportunities to do his project, but he kept putting it off until a later date. And then something unexpected occurred because he got sick, and he had to scramble to complete the project at the last minute. So don't procrastinate. That's what the lesson is. Do your work as soon as you can. Next story. It says, your grandparents called and said that they are going to visit tonight, said April and Ashley's dad at dinner time. Let's wait to have dessert until they arrive. We can have some cookies. April groaned. I don't want to wait. I want my dessert now. Well, if you choose to have your dessert now, you won't get any when your grandparents arrive, her dad said. I know, April replied, and she went to the cupboard and helped herself to 2 cookies. I'll wait for Grandma and Grandpa, said Ashley. And when the girls' grandparents arrived an hour later, they announced that they wanted to take the girls to the nearby ice cream shop for a treat. They knew the girls loved going there. Well, Ashley hasn't had her dessert yet, so she can go. April already had her dessert for tonight, though, so she'll get to stay home with me, Dad explained. April sadly watched out the window as Ashley and her grandparents left for the ice cream shop. So think about this. Think about the girl, April, who didn't want to wait, and because she didn't wait, what happened? She didn't get to go get her ice cream, right? So what lesson did she learn? If you think about it, the theme of this story is to be patient. Sometimes when you're patient, good things happen, right? Have you heard that old saying, good things happen to those who wait? It's kind of what the moral of this story is. Because April was not willing to wait an hour, she missed out on a better opportunity that presented herself. And ice cream would have been a lot better than those cookies. Okay, so we're going to look at parts of a chapter book. We're going to look a little bit at Because of Winn-Dixie. We're going to start on pages 49 of our story. And I'm going to read you a few pages. He went, but this is what I will never forget. He took the book with him. Nuh-uh, I said. Yes, ma'am, said Miss Franny. He snatched it up and ran. Did he come back? I asked. Nope, I never saw him again. Well, the men in town used to tease me about it. They used to say, Miss Franny, we saw that bear of yours out in the woods today. He was reading that book, and he said it sure was good, and would it be all right if he kept it just another week? Yes, ma'am. They did tease me about it, she sighed. I imagine I'm the only one left from those days. I imagine I'm the only one that even recalls that bear. All my friends, everyone I knew when I was young, they're all dead and gone. She sighed again. She looked sad and old and wrinkled. It was the same way I felt sometimes, being friendless in a new town and not having a mama to comfort me. I sighed too. Winn-Dixie raised his head off his paws and looked back and forth between me and Miss Franny. He sat up and then showed Miss Franny his teeth. Well, now, look at that, she said. That dog's smiling at me. It's a talent of his, I told her. It is a fine talent, Miss Franny said. A very fine talent. And she smiled back at Winn-Dixie. We could be friends, I said to Miss Franny. I mean you and me and Winn-Dixie. We could all be friends. Miss Franny smiled even bigger. Why, that would be grand, she said. Just grand. And right at that minute, right when the three of us had decided to be friends, who should come marching into the Herman W. Block Memorial Library but old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. She walked right up to Miss Franny's desk and said, I just finished Donnie Tremaine, and I enjoyed it very much. I would like something even more difficult to read now, because I'm an advanced reader. Yes, dear, I know, said Miss Franny, and she got up out of her chair. Amanda pretended like I wasn't there. She stared right past me. Are dogs allowed in the library? She asked Miss Franny as they walked away. Certain ones, said Miss Franny. A select few. And then she turned around and winked at me. I smiled back. I had just made my first friend in Naomi, and nobody was going to mess with that up for me, not even old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. Winn-Dixie's bald spots started growing fur, and the fur Winn-Dixie's bald spots started growing fur, and the fur that he had to begin with started looking shiny and healthy. And he didn't limp anymore. And you could tell that he was proud of looking so good, proud of not looking like a stray. I thought what he needed most was a collar and a leash. So I went into Gertrude's Pets, where there were fish and snakes and mice and lizards and gerbils and pet supplies, and I found a real handsome red leather collar with a matching leash. Winn-Dixie was not allowed to come inside the store. There was a big sign on the door that said no dogs allowed. So I held the collar and the leash up to the window, and Winn-Dixie, who was standing on the other side of the window, pulled up his lip and showed me his teeth, and sneezed and wagged his tail something furious. So I knew he absolutely loved that leash and collar combination. But it was very expensive. I decided to explain my situation to the man behind the counter. I said, I don't get a big enough allowance to afford something this fancy, but I love this collar and leash, so does my dog, and I was thinking that maybe you could set me up on an installment plan. Installment plan, said the man. Gertrude! Somebody screamed in a real irritating voice. I looked around. It was a parrot. She was sitting on top of one of the fish tanks looking right at me. An installment plan, I said, ignoring the parrot. You know, where I promise to give you my allowance every week and you give me the leash and the collar now. I don't think I can do that, said the man. He shook his head. No, the owner, she wouldn't like that. He looked down at the counter. He wouldn't look at me. He had thick black hair, and it was slicked back like Elvis Presley's. He had on a name tag that said Otis. Or I could work for you, I said. I could come in and sweep the floors and dust the shelves and take out the trash. I could do that. I looked around Gertrude's Pets. There was sand and sunflower seed shells and big dust bunnies all over the floor. I could tell that it needed to be swept. Said Otis. He looked down at the counter some more. Gertrude, the parrot screamed again. I'm real trustworthy, I said. I'm new in town, but my daddy is a preacher. He's the preacher at the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi, so I'm real honest. But the only thing is, Winn-Dixie, my dog, he would have to come inside with me, because if we get separated for too long, he starts to howl something terrible. Gertrude doesn't like dogs, said Otis. Is she the owner? I asked. No, and he finally looked up and he pointed at the fish tank. That Gertrude, the parrot. I named her after the owner. Gertrude's a pretty bird, screamed Gertrude. She might like Winn-Dixie, I told Otis. Almost everybody does. Maybe he could, come inside and meet her, and if the two of them get along, then I could have the job. Maybe, Otis mumbled. He looked down at the counter again. So I went and opened the door, and Winn-Dixie came trotting on inside the store. Dog! Screamed Gertrude. I know it, Otis told her. And then Gertrude got real quiet. She sat on the top of the fish tank and cocked her head from one side to the other, looking at Winn-Dixie, and Winn-Dixie stood and stared back at her. He didn't hardly move. He didn't wag his tail, he didn't smile, he didn't sneeze, he just stared at Gertrude, and she stared at him. And when she spread her wings out real far and flew and landed on top of Winn-Dixie's head, Dog! She croaked. Winn-Dixie wagged his tail just a tiny little bit. And Otis said, You can start on Monday. Thank you, I told him. You won't be sorry. And on the way out of Gertrude's Pets, I said to Winn-Dixie, You are better at making friends than anybody I have ever known. I bet if my mama knew you, she would think you were the best dog ever. Winn-Dixie was smiling up at me, and I was smiling down at him, and so neither one of us was looking where we were going, and we almost bumped right into Sweetie Pie Thomas. She was standing there sucking on the knuckle of her third finger, staring in the window of Gertrude's Pets. She took her finger out of her mouth and looked at me. Her eyes were all big and round. Was that bird sitting on that dog's head? She asked. She had her hair tied up in a ponytail with a pink ribbon. But it wasn't much of a ponytail. It was mostly ribbon and a few strands of hair. Yes, I told her. I seen it, she said. She nodded her head and put her knuckle back in her mouth. Then she took it out again real quick. I seen that dog in church, too. He was catching a mouse. I want a dog just like it, but my mama, she won't let me get no dog. She says if I'm real good, I might get to buy me a goldfish or one of them gerbils. That's what she says. Can I pet your dog? Sure, I told her. Sweetie Pie stroked Winn-Dixie's head so long and serious that his eyes drooped half closed, and drool came out of the side of his mouth. I'm going to be 6 years old in September. I got to stop sucking on my knuckle once I'm 6, said Sweetie Pie. I'm having a party. Do you want to come to my party? The theme is pink. Sure, I told her. Can this dog come? She asked. You bet, I told her. And all of a sudden I felt happy. I had a dog. I had a job. I had Miss Franny Block for my friend. And I had my first invitation to a party in Naomi. It didn't matter that it came from a 5-year-old, and the party wasn't until September. I didn't feel so lonely anymore. So, what is the recurring thought throughout these two chapters here? That friendship can come in forms you might not expect. She didn't expect to become friends with an older lady or a 5-year-old, right? But she was happy about it because she had no one. She just had Winn-Dixie and her dad, and that was it. So sometimes friendships come in unexpected ways. Opal became friends with Franny and Gloria Dump, 2 older women, and Sweetie Pie Thomas, a 5-year-old girl. And maybe not, she thought people her own age were going to be her friends, but it doesn't always have to work out that way. So we're going to read one more little section here. Sometimes I told Gloria the story Miss Franny Block had just told me. Or I imitated Otis tapping his pointy-toed boots and playing for all the animals, and that always made her laugh. And sometimes I made up a story, and Gloria Dump would listen to it all the way through from beginning to end. She told me she used to love to read stories, but she couldn't anymore because her eyes were so bad. Can't you get some really strong glasses? I asked her. Child, she said, they don't make glasses strong enough for these eyes. One day, when the storytelling was done, I decided to tell Gloria that Otis was a criminal. I thought maybe I should tell an adult about it, and Gloria was the best adult I knew. Gloria, I said. Mm-hmm, she said back. You know Otis. I don't know him, but I know what you tell me about him. Well, he's a criminal. He's been in jail. Do you think I should be afraid of him? Well, what for? I don't know. For doing bad things, I guess, for being in jail. Child, said Gloria, let me show you something. She got up out of her chair real slow and took hold of my arm. Let's the two of us walk all the way to the back of this yard. Okay, I said. And we walked, and Winn-Dixie followed right behind us. It was a huge yard, and I had never been all the way back in it. And when we got to a big old tree, we stopped. Look at this tree, Gloria said. I looked up. There were bottles hanging from just about every branch. There were whiskey bottles and beer bottles and wine bottles all tied on with string, and some of them were clanking against each other and making a spooky kind of noise. Me and Winn-Dixie stood and stared at the tree, and the hair on the top of his nose rose up a little bit, and he growled deep in his throat. Gloria Dump pointed her cane at the tree. What you think about this tree? I said, I don't know. Why are all those bottles on it? To keep the ghosts away, Gloria said. What ghosts? The ghost of all the things I'd done wrong. I looked at all the bottles on the tree. You did that many things wrong? I asked her. Mm-hmm, said Gloria. More than that. But you're the nicest person I know, I told her. Don't mean I haven't done bad things, she said. There's whiskey bottles on there, I told her. And beer bottles. Child, said Gloria Dump. I know that. I'm the one who put 'em there. I'm the one who drank what was in 'em. My mama drank, I whispered. I know it, Gloria Dump said. The preacher says that sometimes she couldn't stop drinking. Mm-hmm, said Gloria again. That's the way it is for some folks. We get started and we can't get stopped. Are you one of those people? Yes, ma'am, I am. But these days I don't drink nothing stronger than coffee. Did the whiskey and the beer and the wine, did they make you do the bad things that are ghosts now? Some of them, said Gloria Dump. Some of them I would have done anyway. Before I learned. Learned what? Learned what is the most important thing. What's that? I asked her. It's different for everyone, she said. You find out on your own. But in the meantime, you got to remember, you can't always judge people by the things they've done. You got to judge them by what they're doing now. You judge Otis by the pretty music he plays and how kind he is to them animals, because that's all you know about him right now. All right? Yes, ma'am, I said. And them Dewberry boys, you try not to judge them too harsh either, all right? All right, I said. All right then, said Gloria Dump. And she turned and started walking away. Winn-Dixie nudged me with his wet nose and wagged his tail. When he saw I wasn't going, he trotted after Gloria. I stayed where I was, and I studied the tree. I wondered if my mama, wherever she was, had a tree full of bottles, and I wondered if I was a ghost to her, the same way she sometimes seemed like a ghost to me. So think about that. It's a pretty intense chapter. What do you think the theme of that is? What lesson do you think they were trying to get Opal to learn? Well, you can't always judge people by the things they've done. Sometimes people change. Judge them by what they're doing now. Maybe they've learned their life lesson. Maybe they're doing things the right way now. So it's just kind of like the old, you can't judge a book by its cover. So don't judge them by the past. Judge them how they are now, how they're treating you, the things that they're doing. It's a good lesson to have. So the evidence. Well, if you look on the bottom of page 96, which I'm going to do right now, It says, it's different for everyone, she said. You find out on your own. But in the meantime, you got to remember, you can't always judge people by the things they've done. You got to judge them by what they're doing now. So that's one of the evidence pieces. Now, we're going to go back and we're going to read page 60 and 62. I know we're jumping around, but that's just the way it is. And we're going to look at page 51 and then 123 to 127. So we're going to go through and we're going to see what theme can be inferred from the reading these pages. And this is the last part we're going to do. Just about everything that happened to me that summer happened because of Winn-Dixie. For instance, without him, I would never have met Gloria Dump. He was the one who introduced us. What happened was this. I was riding my bike home from Gertrude's Pets, and Winn-Dixie was running along beside me. We went past Dunlap and Stevie Dewberry's house, and when Dunlap and Stevie saw me, they got on their bikes and started following me. They wouldn't ride with me. They just rode behind me and whispered things that I couldn't hear. Neither one of them had any hair on his head because their mama shaved their heads every week during the summer because of the one time Dunlap got fleas in his hair from their cat, Sadie. And now they look like two identical bald-headed babies, even though they weren't twins. Dunlap was 10 years old like me, and Stevie was 9 and tall for his age. I can hear you, I hollered back at them. I can hear what you're saying. But I couldn't. Winn-Dixie started to race way ahead of me. You better watch out, Dunlap hollered. That dog is headed right for the witch's house. Winn-Dixie, I called. But he kept on going faster and hopped a gate and went into the most overgrown jungle of a yard that I had ever seen. You better go get your dog out of there, Dunlap said. The witch will eat that dog, Stevie said. Shut up, I told them. I got off my bike and went up to the gate and hollered, Winn-Dixie, you better come on out of there. But he didn't. She's probably eating him right now, Stevie said. He and Dunlap were standing behind me. She eats dogs all the time. Get lost, you bald-headed babies, I said. Hey, said Dunlap, that ain't a very nice way for a preacher's daughter to talk. He and Stevie backed up a little. I stood there and thought for a minute. I finally decided that I was more afraid of losing Winn-Dixie than I was of having to deal with a dog-eating witch. So I went through the gate and into the yard. Okay, now we're going to read page 51. And right at that minute, right when the three of us had decided to be friends, who should come marching into the Herman W. Block Memorial Library but old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. She walked right up to Miss Franny's desk and said, I finished Johnny Tremaine and I enjoyed it very much. I would like something even more difficult to read now because I'm an advanced reader. Yes, dear, I know, said Miss Franny, and she got up out of her chair. Amanda pretended like I wasn't there. She stared right past me. Are dogs allowed in the library? She asked Miss Franny as they walked away. Certain ones, said Miss Franny, a select few. And then she turned around and winked at me. I smiled back. I had just made my first friend in Naomi, and nobody was going to mess that up for me. Not even old pinch-faced Amanda Wilkinson. And then now we're going to 123 to 127. Give me that, I said to Winn-Dixie. But he wouldn't give it up. I had to reach inside his mouth and pull it out. You can't eat candy wrappers, I told him. The preacher cleared his throat. I thought he was going to say something important, maybe tell me another thing that he remembered about my mama. But what he said was, Opal, I had a talk with Mrs. Dewberry the other day. She said that Stevie says that you called him a bald-headed baby. It's true, I said, I did. But he calls Gloria Dump a witch all the time, and he calls Otis retarded. And once he even said that his mama said I shouldn't spend all my time with old ladies. That's what he said. I think you should apologize, said the preacher. Me? I said. Yes, he said. You tell Stevie you're sorry if you said anything that hurt his feelings. I'm sure he just wants to be your friend. I don't think so, I told him. I don't think he wants to be my friend. Some people have a strange way of going about making friends, he said. You apologize. Yes, sir, I said. Then I remembered Carson. Daddy, I said, do you know anything about Amanda Wilkinson? What kind of thing? Do you know something about her and somebody named Carson? Carson was her brother. He drowned last year. He's dead? Yes, said the preacher. His family is still suffering a great deal. How old was he? 5, said the preacher. He was only 5 years old. Daddy, I said, how could you not tell me about something like that? Other people's tragedies should not be the subject of idle conversation. There was no reason for me to tell you. It's just that I needed to know, I said. Because it helps explain Amanda. No wonder she's so pinch-faced. What's that? Said the preacher. Nothing, I said. Good night, India Opal, the preacher said. And he leaned over and kissed me, and I smelled the root beer and the strawberry and the sadness all mixed together on his breath. He patted Winn-Dixie on the head and got up and turned off the light and closed the door. I didn't go to sleep right away. I lay there and thought about how life was like a litmus lozenge, how the sweet and the sad were all mixed up together, and how hard it was to separate them out. It was confusing. Daddy, I shouted. After a minute, he opened the door and raised his eyebrows at me. What was that word you said, the word that meant sad? Melancholy, he said. Melancholy, I repeated. I liked the way it sounded, like there was music hidden somewhere inside it. Good night now, the preacher said. Good night, I told him back. I got up out of bed and unwrapped a litmus lozenge and sucked on it hard and thought about my mama leaving me. That was a melancholy feeling. And then I thought about Amanda and Carson, and that made me feel melancholy too. Poor Amanda, and poor Carson. He was the same age as Sweetie Pie, but he would never get to have a 6th birthday party. Then we're going to go and we're going to read the very last paragraph of the book. So, spoiler warning. Otis laughed and strummed his guitar, and the flavor of the litmus lozenge opened in my mouth like a flower blooming, all sweet and sad. And then Otis and Gloria and Stevie and Miss Franny and Dunlap and Amanda and Sweetie Pie and my daddy all started to sing a song. And I listened careful so I could learn it right. So what do you think the theme is from all of these passages? What was the whole overarching theme? That first impressions of people aren't always accurate. You have to keep an open mind about others. That's kind of the theme of the whole book here. Because she judged Otis because he was a criminal. She judged, the old lady because she thought she was a witch at first, whenever she really wasn't. She was super nice, right? And then she had judged Amanda, and to come to find out, the only reason Amanda acted that way was because, she had lost her brother. So I hope this helps with theme. I thought it was a good way to kind of incorporate a chapter book into our lesson. Remember, theme can be universal, which means that it can be applied to more than one story, that we don't use names. It's not always stated in the story. A lot of times you kind of have to read into it and infer it, and that it can be kind of repeated in different ways throughout the story. So this has been Mr. Frederick with the Knox County Public Library Tutor Team. If you would like to watch this video again or watch any of our other videos, go to the YouTube page and search Knox County Public Library's Tutor Team. I will see you again next week. Thank you.